Welcome to For F1's Sake, a podcast by two idiotic Formula 1 fans chatting absolute nonsense and offering our ridiculously biased opinions, and we are finally back in the 2023 season. It's been a long wait. We've had a special episode. If you've not seen it, go back and check it out. But we're back for the first reaction and review of 2023. So, Brad, my first question to you is, what would you rate the Bahrain Grand Prix out of 10?
I would actually put it as like a 4 or 5. I mean, the initial hype, I had so much hype going into this weekend, like you would, first race of the season. And it just, I think I speak for a lot of people when I'm saying it didn't really live up to the expectation.
No, it didn't, did it? It was, like you said, it was so hyped up. And I think everybody was so excited. I mean, we were both so excited. You know, we've not had racing for so long. Finally, we got cars on track in competition, but it was another, what I'm afraid it was going to be. It's another kind of Red Bull steam train, wasn't it? It's just, where's the competition? Where, you know, I'm worried that this season is going to turn out to be the Verstappen show again, and I think that's a big problem for Formula One. Straight off the bat, I think Formula One's got an issue if Red Bull are going to be that far in the lead.
It's a very depressing tone to start out the podcast, isn't it? The first thing we say is it's probably going to be a Red Bull dominating year. I mean, George said it in his first interview.
Exactly. I mean, Christ, the first interview that we see from George this season is that, and you just think, we've had one race, and if George is saying it already, then what hope have we got for the rest of this season?
Yeah, it's not looking great, but you know what, Tom? We have to enjoy it. We're Formula One fans. I probably will still enjoy it. It looks good in the midfield, but yeah, I just wasn't impressed by the fact that the teams were still far behind Red Bull. I mean, Max was 38 seconds up on Perez in about 15 laps. No, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, it's not right.
No, it's not, and it also begs the question: how much impact has this cost cap punishment made?
None.
It's not, has it? It's not made any difference to Red Bull. And so what's to stop other teams from thinking, well, let's just, I mean, you know, it's interesting the way that they worded it, I think, and I only heard this since watching Drive to Survive, and it was a case of, well, yes, it could have been 400 grand catering budget, but that doesn't really mean much because, you know, you could spend that 400 extra on catering, but the 400 that you've actually spent could have gone into the development of the car. And so then you just transfer that cost over to the catering. So it doesn't really translate to much. It's a case that they most likely have spent that on performance, and it hasn't impacted them. They're still benefiting from it. I mean, 11 seconds in the lead by, I don't know, was it lap 21? It's ridiculous. I mean, that is a huge gap. They're not going to make up an 11-second difference by the end of the season, Ferrari or Aston Martin, I don't believe.
Yeah, I mean, what was more surprising for me was the fact that in qualifying, the entire grid in Q1 were like a second apart, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you get to the race, and then suddenly Max is 2 seconds up on the first lap. I just don't quite understand how that works. I mean, obviously, he had a quick start, and the other cars at the back of the grid can't move until he started to get forward. But I just don't understand how they can be 2 seconds behind within a lap of racing when it was a clean start. Everyone's got quick cars. Start. Yeah, really. For Bahrain, that's the cleanest start I think we've seen, especially going into a really sharp turn one. I just didn't enjoy that aspect of the race. The start of it was just a little bit boring, and there's no real fight instantly as we got into the race.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I don't think there was that much of a fight for the majority of the race. I mean, thank God Alonso was there with Hamilton and Russell and Sainz, because without that, there wasn't really much to look at on track. I mean, we didn't see Verstappen for the entire race because he wasn't even remotely challenged. And it just leaves me with a little bit of, I don't know.
Just worry, isn't it?
It's worry and it's disappointment. I mean, they're the two words I would describe the Bahrain Grand Prix with was worry and disappointment. It's not really how you want to start the season, is it?
No, well, it's definitely not the way we want to start the season. I wanted to be proud to have that Lance Stroll hat behind me for the first time in my life, and I still wasn't happy with his performance.
What an effort though for him to get back into the car after.
Yeah, amazing. I think they were saying that he couldn't do qualifying with the way he was turning the wheel at one point, and they said he should have put Drugovich back in the car. But I don't think that was really the case. I think he was resting it during free practice, and then he tested himself properly when it got to FP3 in qualifying. So he seemed okay. He was resting a little bit with the car, but overall, I'm sure he's happy with the result. Much better than last year, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see how quick he is when he's back fully fit, in comparison to Alonso, because he performed pretty well against Vettel last season. And so, it would be interesting to see how he performs against who we know is also an extremely good driver in Alonso, but he's not, we've not seen him, past his best, a little bit like how Vettel was, towards the end of his career. But Aston Martin have got a quick car. I mean, I was a little bit disappointed in their qualifying pace. I was expecting a little bit more from them after them topping FP2 and FP3, I think it was. And so I thought maybe we'd have seen them a little bit higher up on the grid based off those performances. But nonetheless, in the race, they were excellent. They had a really good car. Not quite quick enough to get any further up on the Ferraris, but I think that was based on the fact that Stroll kind of collided with Alonso on the first lap.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was going to be another moment where he's going to react the same way he did towards Ocon last season, but he was over it pretty quickly, which was good news. I mean, lucky there was no damage on that car, because that would have been the biggest letdown this weekend if we didn't see what we had from Alonso in the end. But yeah, that battle should be interesting, because like you said, Stroll did well against Vettel. He's really not a bad driver, and he's quite experienced now. People forget that he's been around in Formula One for a damn long time. So there's quite a lot of experience in that Aston team. I do think on certain tracks, Stroll will give Alonso a bit of a challenge if he's fully fit. But I don't understand right now whether or not the battle is going to be between Mercedes and the Aston, or if Mercedes are completely behind the Ferrari and the Aston. It's a little bit weird right now. So I don't know where it stands.
From what Toto Wolff has come out and said is essentially that Mercedes is working as they intended, it's just not quick enough. And based off the race pace that we saw this weekend, I would say the Astons are ahead of Mercedes, which is worrying for them because of the fact that they're a customer team. There's no real reason for a customer team like Aston Martin to be ahead of a huge manufacturer in Mercedes and such a successful manufacturer. So that's a worry. And so that begs the question, I mean, do you think we've heard a lot of rumours around it, and it seemed that was going to be the case even before the Grand Prix started. But it sounds to me like Mercedes are potentially looking to change their concept completely midway through the season.
Well, yeah, we've heard that a couple of teams like McLaren, Mercedes have got like these B-spec cars that they're potentially going to be looking at pretty early in the season. With one race in, people have to say that it's a little bit of a worry for the teams. I don't quite believe that they're going to have a concept that they're not already using that's going to be quicker than their first car. That just wouldn't make sense, because that means that there's something fundamentally wrong with the team to make the wrong decision to put out that whatever the A-spec car is.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, because if that car, if it's working how they intended it to, and they had like you said, it had a B-spec car that was due to be faster anyway, then why would they not just develop the faster car? But in McLaren's circumstance, it was a case that they realised the concept that they showed in Bahrain wasn't going to be quick, and so they abandoned the development of that car fairly early on in the development process at the end of last season. So they've already been developing this B-spec car for quite a few months. It's just a case that they weren't physically able to get it ready in time for the first few Grand Prix. But with Mercedes, I think it's slightly different. I think they've kind of committed to this zero side pods thing, and it's not worked. I think maybe they didn't realise how much quicker the Red Bull was going to be, because you would be forgiven for thinking with not only the cost cap punishment, but also the fact that they should have had reduced wind tunnel testing times, reduced CFD items. You'd think that, I mean, they've not been affected at all. They haven't been affected whatsoever with regards to these rules. And so it ponders the question, are those rules stringent enough? Are they, are these percentage gaps between first in the championship to last big enough to kind of warrant those rules? It doesn't.
Yeah, there's no good answer to it right now, is there? I mean, we are only one race in, so maybe this track does really favour the Red Bull car, and they're just going to be really quick over that. Maybe these hotter tracks, I don't know what the situation is right now. I think it's too early to say Red Bull are just going to walk away with it. I think there's a massive part of me that feels like they probably are. But I think Ferrari were quite surprised by their pace, but I think they should be more surprised at the lack of pace that the other teams are showing rather than their pace, because they're roughly where they were last year in this race. Yeah, I mean, there's just letdowns all over the field. I think we should start with a team, actually. I think we should probably dive straight into McLaren, because we both took the decision to kind of support McLaren this year. I said I was going to support Piastri. What a fucking letdown. I can't believe that McLaren have gone into this race with such a lack of ability, especially when they've had a great progression over the years getting to where they have been to. And then suddenly Piastri is out within like 10 laps. Norris has 74 stops during the race. It all went wrong. Give me your opinion on
that. On one hand, I'm furious. On the other hand, I'm gutted. Like you said, they've taken such a step back, McLaren, since the 2021 season. They were making incremental improvements until the end of that season. We saw them coming through from the back of the midfield to the middle of the midfield to the very, the sharp end of the midfield. And then 2022 came around and they weren't fantastic, but they were still there or thereabouts. But testing, final practice and qualifying and the race, they were just appalling. It was so bad from McLaren. I mean, like you said, Piastri had, I think it was electrical issues, and so they had to change his steering wheel, and then after they did that, the car wouldn't start again. I mean, come on. And then Norris, I don't quite understand the situation with Norris, because I know that he had a pneumatic leak, and so they were having to constantly fill up the air in the car. But when you're making a pit stop a lap before the end, when you're already in last place and pretty much had been last place the entire race, why are they not retiring the car? Why are they not saving the engine and the mileage on the engine to then go into the next race and have a fresh... I just don't understand it.
I was thinking that as well, but I've got a feeling that they're keeping him out and keep getting those lap times in just to see where they are standing with that car. I guess that maybe just more for development purposes, to see what else they can figure out during that race time, because they're not going to get much else testing. Other than like media days. So
I kind of get that with the data wise, I suppose. It gives them more data to go off. And one thing that was interesting that Lando said, he said, the car can be quick, but the window, the operating window in order to make it fast is so small. It's a lot easier to make a mistake.
See, I thought McLaren's race pace was actually quite impressive when Lando got a decent run without having to come in, because we saw that he caught right up to the back of Lewis and I think it was Alonso actually at the time. He kept up with them, and he also had that massive lock up into like turn 5 or something, where he dropped off the back of them by a couple of seconds, and he caught back up again within a few laps. So that car must be quick to be able to keep up with those two, especially when they're in the middle of a battle.
Well, yeah, because he did quite well in qualifying to get to P11, and I know it was
amazingly well. Yeah,
there was an air of luck about it, but that was a pretty good qualifying performance. It just shows you how good Lando Norris is. Yeah. One thing that worries me now is the fact that this is clearly isn't going to be a quick fix for McLaren. I mean, we saw it again in the testing where they had the issues with the front brakes or the front wing brows or whatever it was. It was to do with the front, whatever it might be. But it was just so reminiscent of last season, and it didn't get any better for them really last season.
Yeah, we've gone from one Danny Rick to two Danny Ricks. That's what it seems like.
I do feel for Piastri, because I mean, it was out of his control at the end of the day. I mean, I know that he didn't qualify particularly well. There wasn't, no. How many laps did he get in the end, I think?
I don't know. It wasn't many. It was a very, very small amount. I don't think he actually got to his first pit stop, did he? That was his stop. If I'm correct in thinking that. I can't remember. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for what he would have wanted. And I think he was pretty, he looked pretty visibly upset with his the inability to restart the car when they changed the wheel. I don't know how that works. I've never seen anyone change a steering wheel on the car coming into a pit.
No, I haven't, to be fair.
Very strange to watch. I didn't even know they could do that like that. So, a little bit crazy.
It was strange. And what worries me now is the fact that, Lando Norris, we know, is such a good driver. And they've also got Piastri, who was also a fantastic driver. What worries me now is that Lando is going to be much more easily swayed to move to another team. As a McLaren fan, at least, he's in this position now where he's an excellent driver and he's not got the package underneath him. And I worry for McLaren because they need to get that package sorted as soon as possible. Otherwise, they will lose Norris. There will be another team that potentially could buy him out of his contract. We know that Audi are interested potentially in 2026. I know it's a few years away, but they've got to do something, and they've got to do it quick.
They have to, because you can easily see them slipping into the Williams state of where they were for so long. I mean, arguably a really impressive race for Williams, this one, but McLaren are slipping back. They're a team that has amazing success in the sport, but so are Williams. It's not impossible to happen. They could go into that state where they're just signing drivers that they can get, and it's a bit lackluster. But maybe they surprise us. Maybe they do figure out this B-spec car and the wind tunnel comes online, or if it is online, I don't know if it's online already, but maybe that will help. I don't know.
I hope so. That's got to be their saving grace. When that wind tunnel does come online, and if we do get this B-spec car in the next few races. If we do get this B-spec car in the next few races, fingers crossed, it makes a big difference, because without that, I think we could be in for a few years of heartache with McLaren, which is a shame.
I don't know why I chose Piastri as my guy to support this year. It might be a mistake already, but I'm going to stick with it. I tell you what's really pissing me off with McLaren is actually listening to Zach Brown when he comes on the radio, and he's so calm, but it's that American voice, like, oh yeah, man, it's okay, and like. Just give us the information. If that car is totally fucked, you may as well tell us, because sandbagging your information isn't going to affect any other team. It's only stopping them from getting better, and nobody understands it. We hear Ted and stuff on Ted's notebook, and even he's confused by the level of information that McLaren are giving out. It looks bad. It looks really bad. I don't believe this B-spec car is going to be enough to save their season.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of instability at McLaren with Seidel leaving as well. And I know that Andreas Stella has been at the team for a number of years, but it's difficult having a change that close to the beginning of a season. And having a new driver coming in, and it's just as they need to kind of settle things down, I think, at McLaren and focus on the performance of the car and kind of getting back into the rhythm of things and getting that momentum back. They've just completely lost that momentum. And it worries me that they're going to really struggle to get that back.
Yeah, right. Who's next, Thomas?
Well,
who's next?
Let's talk a little bit more about Aston Martin then, because we've not talked about it, because obviously we've not been recording very much recently, with it being the off season. We did that special episode, like I mentioned at the beginning, and so we've not really talked about Aston Martin and how they've come about to be the second best team or third best team. What do you reckon?
I think on their day they're going to be the second best team.
Yeah, I think if Stroll doesn't knock into Alonso in the next race, potentially he could get onto the second step of the podium, provided Perez isn't there or thereabouts. But talking about Aston Martin, obviously they've got Dan Fallows, who used to be at Red Bull. He was the protege, as you were, of Adrian Newey, our favourite F1 designer. And so they've got the resources there. Obviously, they've got the money now with the Stroll family taking over Aston Martin, and so they've had this kind of running theme of copying cars. I mean, we saw this with the pink Mercedes. Do you remember? Was it 2020? Where they turned up to testing and all of a sudden it was an identical version of last year's Mercedes, and it did pretty well for them. And I think they've kind of followed a similar kind of concept with this year in taking the Red Bull design and kind of manipulating it to their own car and their own underpinnings, but it seems to be working wonders for them. They've steered away from this zero concept design. I think what we're seeing now from most of the teams, the downwash effect from the side pods, which is something that the Red Bull, the Aston, and a lot of the other teams in the field are now utilising, seems to be the big kind of performance factor, which is why we think potentially Mercedes are going to then introduce this downwashing side pods now that Toto's pretty much shunned that design. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so Aston Martin are now doing really well. They've also got Alonso in the team, who is a two-time world champion. We know how ruthlessly quick Alonso is. He's been able to perform in every series he's been a part of, whether that's F1, IndyCar, I say IndyCar, I mean the Indy 500, but he's done the Dakar, he's done all sorts, and he seems to do exceptionally well at all of them. And he's proved this weekend that he's still got it. Even at the age of, was he 41 now? He's still able to get on the podium. I mean, that's pretty good going.
Fully deserved as well. There's some crazy overtakes during that race. I mean, he's getting overtake of the race easily for me. I don't know what turn it is coming into. I'm terrible at getting the numbers right. But it's that really hairpinny one into the long straight. That sounds terrible. That's an awful excuse I don't even know what I'm doing. But yeah, he goes down there, comes in at Lewis and takes him in a place you never see overtakes, which is so Fernando of old.
It's down the inside, wasn't it? Is it turn 11?
Down the inside of Lewis into a corner you never see overtakes. And Lewis just, he just gives it away. There's nothing he could do to defend that. And he's one of the best defensive drivers we've ever seen. And that sort of thing happens. That really shows that Alonso's here to play, and he wants to win. And I do think he can get that third spot behind the Red Bull. It has to.
Yeah, well, he said on the radio, didn't he, towards the end of the race, it was a lovely car to drive.
He said about 50 times, didn't he?
Yeah, so he's happy with it. So that's the main thing, They've got a really solid concept on their hands at Aston Martin, and Lawrence has picked it up, saying, it's only going to get faster, which we hope it does, because they are, as good as they are still a fair ways off the Red Bull. And I think at the moment, I would say they're slightly, very, very slightly behind the Ferraris. However, that could just be purely down to, Leclerc's pace, because we know how good Leclerc is, and obviously he's a lot younger than Alonso. But I think that they're third best at the moment, but I could see them very easily surpassing Ferrari, because it's guaranteed that Ferrari will be making a plethora of mistakes this season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Aston Martin capitalised on quite a few of those. I just want them to progress a little bit quicker so we can actually get a challenge on the Red Bulls. I just don't want this season to turn into the Red Bull Max Verstappen show.
Yeah, I don't want that either. I don't think anyone wants that to happen, but I've got a feeling that the guys in the Aston cars, one of them's not fit, so he's definitely going to get better.
Yeah.
And Alonso is just getting back to grips with a car that he's comfortable with, and it's a lot faster than what he's used to last year. So the way he's going to be taking these tracks is slightly different to what he would have done last year. So I'm hoping after a couple of races he really gets to grips with this car and understand the way it's going to turn in during a faster lap, or just the bite that he's got with it. Because right now he looks like he's still nursing it a little bit, rather than watching Max. You see Max is attacking every single corner, and he believes in that car so much. And I think that's what Alonso just hasn't quite got.
It is a good point, to be fair. He has only had 4 days in the car, essentially. So he's not learnt it inside out. So
Max has just got back into the same car as last year, really, isn't he?
He has, yeah. It's just got into a better version of last year's car, which is scary.
Yeah.
We need a title challenge this year. I'm disappointed in Ferrari. I thought they would have made more of a step forward. I feel like Ferrari's pretty much stayed where they were last season. I don't really think that they've made much of an improvement. So let's talk about Ferrari, actually. So obviously Leclerc didn't make it to the end of the race. Again, another factor that points towards them not really taking a step forward. And Sainz just still... I heard Martin Brundle talking about Sainz before the season began, and he said, he could be a dark horse for Ferrari this season. He thinks that he could even edge out Leclerc. And I remember, since putting that bet on Sainz to beat Leclerc and be first in the championship, was it last season? It must have been. I don't have faith in him as much anymore. I've conceded that Leclerc is just the better driver all round. And I think that 2019... Or 2019. 2021 was just an off year for Leclerc. I just think he is by far and away better than Sainz.
Yeah, he proves his pace. And I think his one lap pace out of everyone on the grid is probably the best, in my opinion. Over qualifying, we always see the very best of Leclerc. And I think if he had that extra lap, he may have beaten Verstappen's time. So he's definitely quick, and the Ferrari is quick. But it's not about that one lap pace anymore. So I'm a little bit worried for Leclerc, because he doesn't seem to have the race pace that Mr. Verstappen's does put out. We've always talked about Max being a bit of a robot and being so perfect with his driving. I don't think Leclerc quite has that ability that Max seems to have right now.
Yeah, so, Leclerc for me in this race kind of conceded it almost immediately. As soon as Max pulled out, a second's lead in the first lap or so,
Yeah,
he was just like, well, yeah, I'll just leave him to it. And it's so defeatist. I don't know whether it's he knows that he's already driving on the limit of the car and it is just what it is, or whether he has just already. I mean, it's like George. I mean, as true as it might be that Verstappen is walking away with it, you can't admit that in race one, because then where's your motivation for the rest of the season? You have to be able to manage the mental aspect of it. And if you've already conceded it in race one, you're not doing that.
Yeah, so this is something that we never saw with Red Bull during the time that Mercedes was dominating. They always gave it their best shot to try and catch up or give them a challenge, which Max has done exceptionally well over the years. And now that he's in the quickest car, I feel like there's no way to keep up, because Leclerc will know that Max is not struggling in that car. He's got low degradation. The car's quick. Over the radio, all you hear, I think we only heard it to Sainz in this race, admittedly, but they said, we've got to look after the tyres and we're happy to do that. There's no point pushing, because by the time you catch up to Max, they're probably just saving. They're probably just going to go again up the road, and then you're then struggling for tyres. The Aston's going to come down the road and start taking you. It's just not going to work. So they have to prioritise. But I'm sad to say that I actually placed a bet before the race that Charles Leclerc would be the one that DNFs. And lo and behold, he's the first person to DNF.
What did you win?
Second. But yeah, what a shame.
What did you win?
What did I win? Money. Monetary value.
Much? How much?
A little bit. Win? I'm not going to go into detail. We're not gambling men here.
We need to know.
I got about 50 quid, so I was pretty happy. It's nothing too much, but it's a nice little amount. I only put a $5 on it, so it was a good return. But with Leclerc at that track, he actually has probably the best results there, or at least pace.
He is a specialist at Bahrain, Leclerc. And that's why I was disappointed in his race pace. I don't know. It was just a bit lackluster this weekend, and I think that DNF, I don't know, maybe it's a kick in the arse that he needs to be like, right, well, I need to bring the results in the next round. I want to see him do more. Nobody seems to have, on the face of it, nobody seems to have the same desire to win that Verstappen does. I'm going to say it now.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't. They're all either, like Russell, like I said, he's a bit defeatist. Leclerc kind of gave up. You could see that on his race pace. They just... I just don't want to see it. I mean, that's not competition at the end of the day. Somebody's got to put this challenge towards Red Bull. They have to do it, and you can't do that by playing on the negative. You have to have a positive mental attitude, and at least kid yourself into thinking that you can do it, if not anybody else.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, though? The media direction was like spot on during that race. It's the way that you heard halfway through, we're going to stick to plan A. And that's the only team you hear we're going to stick to plan A for. And the second I heard that radio call, I'm like, here we fucking go. Here we go, Ferrari. Here we go again. I was like, surely this isn't going to happen. And then 5 laps later, Leclerc's out. And you're like, oh, God, it's just going to be the same year for Ferrari where they can't deal with the pressure that Red Bull applied to them.
Red Bull's plan A is just first and second, isn't it? We win.
Plan A is no messing about. Yeah. Let's win the race.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, getting into Mercedes a little bit, again, another team I wasn't really impressed with. I thought they were sandbagging a little bit during qualifying. It's like that lap of pace that we saw from Lewis in Q2. I was like, oh, hello. Lewis is actually pretty quick. But he really wasn't. It didn't end up being that way, and it just ended up dropping behind the others again.
Yeah, I just think the Mercedes outright pace just isn't quite there. No. I think they are comfortably 4th best. I think Aston Martin are definitely ahead of Mercedes. I was a little bit surprised that Russell didn't get closer to Hamilton in qualifying. Even in the race, actually, he wasn't. He wasn't at his best. No, he wasn't. Because there was a point where Russell was saying, is Hamilton saving his tyres or is he struggling? And they were saying, well, no, he's struggling. And so why they didn't swap those cars around at that point, I don't know. Whether George just thought, all right, okay, well, they're going to keep him in front, so I don't know, I'll give up, I'll just sit here. I don't know. I just feel like it was a bit of a slow start to the season for everybody but Verstappen.
Well, Perez did well too. I think Perez had a great race. He just kind of did his job.
Yeah,
you're never going to keep up with Verstappen.
That's what you have to do. That's all you have to do in Red Bull. Just do your job, and you'll
But I've said
get on the
I've
podium.
said it for all of last year. I think Perez is the best second seat driver we've had at Red Bull for years, and years. Because he just does his job and he doesn't moan about anything. He just gets on with it.
Other than Ricciardo, when he was there, I think Ricciardo was quicker because he would beat Verstappen, on a number of occasions. But then again, you could argue that Verstappen
He did,
was
but how many race
younger.
wins has Ricciardo even got under Red Bull? It wasn't many. It was only like 4 or 5. It wasn't.
I thought it was 7. I'm sure he got 7.
Well, 7 then. If it's 7, but how many years was Ricciardo at Red Bull for?
I don't know. 4?
4?
5?
I feel like it's 4. But
4 or 5. I don't know.
Perez hasn't had that time yet. He's already got a few race wins for Red Bull. So he's doing the exact same thing, if anything, that Ricciardo was able to put out. But he's impressive.
Perez.
Back into Mercedes, mate. We need to stick on topic.
Yeah, okay, go
on. Like you said, Russell was giving it all that with the radio calls towards the start, saying, is Lewis struggling? I've got more pace. And then he dropped off. I don't think that was because Lewis was picking up the pace or anything. I just don't think Russell could keep up with Hamilton over that race duration. I don't know. Maybe they're thinking about pit stops and told him to slow off a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I want to see more from Russell this season.
He's got a battle.
He's got a battle on his hands because if that Mercedes does start, if they do have this B concept in the works and it does come around and it is quicker, Russell then has to start thinking about, well, Hamilton is going to perk up a little bit. Once Hamilton can sniff a podium, I think that we'll see a more invigorated Lewis. But definitely. Russell should be doing that already. Russell, I think, needs to be a lot closer to Hamilton in qualifying and the race, because if he wants to live up to his name, at least. Anyway, I think he's an excellent driver, and I know that it's harsh to compare him against, statistically, what is the best driver of all time. But he's got a reputation, as George, and I think he needs to live up to it. I think he's not quite, for me, living up to the hype that was around him when he was at Williams. I thought he would have. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know that he outperformed Lewis last year, but that wasn't Lewis at his best, and we know that wasn't Lewis at his best because he kind of pretty much gave up last season because he knew there was nothing in that car. And so you can't.
Drive to Survive also solidified the fact that Lewis was doing a lot of testing for Mercedes during that time, that he was trying to develop the way the car was. Took a lot of pain doing that, and it just didn't really work out quick enough for the Mercedes to catch up. They were doing better towards the end of the season, and it's not an awful start for them this year. But yeah, like you said, Russell has a lot to live up to with another British driver in the other seat. And we heard before the race from, I think it was Rosberg said, your greatest opponent will be your teammate because you're in the same car. Yeah. You've got to challenge that teammate. And Lewis just, he walked away with it. And if he's comfortable in that car, he will walk away with it.
Yeah, he will. He will. And it's the only way that you're going to become one of the greatest is if you beat the greatest. When Lewis came into McLaren in 2008, 2007, he was challenging Alonso immediately. With a competitive car. And I know that they've not had a competitive car, but he was challenging him immediately. And I don't think George has been quite that aggressive in terms of his pace against Hamilton. I don't know. Somebody prove me wrong.
At least, have we? We get glimpses, but he couldn't even handle the pace of Stroll. I mean, Stroll's... he's on an injury. It's maybe a quicker car anyway, but
it's got to be so much faster, that car. It has
Mercedes
to be.
Will be battling nobody.
Yeah, well, fighting the wind.
they are. They're not going to be doing anything. They're going to be that middle of the pack. They're going to be the best of the rest team this year, which is an absolute embarrassment to be able to say that. That Aston have got this pace. Aston Martin of all teams, the team that we slagged off so much last year, who have lost one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history, in my opinion, with Vettel. It's just...
I bet he's kicking himself.
Oh, he must be so pissed. There's no way he's gone back home to be with his wife and kid and gone, this was a great decision. Imagine him and Alonso in those seats. What a season we would have seen if they were both in the seat.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine that?
That would have been unreal. Vettel and Alonso.
One for the history books, that, wouldn't it?
That would have been incredible. Yeah, I would have loved to have seen that. That would have been amazing. It's just a shame. Anyway, It's just a shame that Stroll owns the team anyway. But if he didn't, maybe they wouldn't be in the position that they are anyway because they wouldn't have had the money. The next kind of person I wanted to talk to that I was actually really impressed with, and we didn't really give him much credence when we talked about him in the last episode, which was Logan Sargent. He made up 3 places immediately on the first lap, and he pretty much kept that for the entire race. I think he had a fantastic race. I was actually pleasantly surprised by him, and I think he did a fantastic job.
No, I totally agree. Instantly agree with that. And there was a part of me, because now I've already said on the previous episode that I will get his name tattooed on me if he gets more points than Albon. I'm starting to worry a little bit about that because he did show a lot of pace.
He did.
And the way he drove, you can see that at certain tracks he's going to be really good. So a little bit of a worry for me, but for Williams, it's incredible. And they showed absolutely brilliant pace during the weekend. The qualifying was decent enough.
Yeah.
Sargent kept up. Albon was still his usual self. He drove for the way you'd expect him to. So
and we know Albon's a solid driver, and Sargent was there or thereabouts through qualifying and through the race, and so we know that they're both extracting pretty much most of the performance from that car, and so that was excellent. And Williams are definitely on the up. Finally, they've got a car that isn't back of the field. They were pretty decent this weekend. They were pretty good all-round team. I think that obviously they're still in the midfield, but I think they're smack bang in the middle of that midfield now. They're on the way up, and I think anything that's better than last for Williams is a great season. If they can continue that for the rest of this season, I think that they've done a fantastic job, and so fair play to them. Obviously, they've got James Vowles now as team principal, and so he knows what it takes to win.
Yeah,
it will definitely help.
That will definitely help. But I've got to apologise. I know Sargent's probably listening to this, so I've got to apologise to him because I looked at this on a standpoint that it was because he's an American, he's coming into the sport for sponsorship purposes. That doesn't seem to be true. And maybe he's never quite had the machinery under him or the team to perform at the level that he just did. So again, it could be one where we're going to eat our words at the end of the season and go, he's actually not a bad driver at all. But maybe he'll slip back into the Guan Yu Zhou and Yuki Tsunoda kind of situation where they're there, but they're not there.
Challenging.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're there just to make up the points.
Yeah, exactly.
Potentially, but for Williams, I mean, God, that's a result, isn't it?
That'll be a load off for them.
A couple of years ago, they finished with 1 point. I mean, I think they've definitely made a step forward, as opposed to AlphaTauri, who've definitely made a step back. They've had a terrible weekend, as has Haas. 2 teams that I think have done really poorly, and I'm annoyed because I got a fantasy F1 league, and I'd put Hulkenberg as one of my drivers, and he qualified well.
I don't know who I put.
He just had a terrible race.
I'm going to check who I actually put in my team because I actually don't know.
Because we know, I mean, we spoke to James about this. Hulkenberg is an amazing driver. Those that don't know, Hulkenberg was able to win the junior categories in successive seasons in a similar way to Hamilton and Piastri, for example. And so he's a phenomenal driver, and so we know how quick he is. And it looked off testing that Haas were pretty high up there. They looked like one of the, if not best of the rest, one behind that, around where McLaren was last season. And so they looked like they made a huge step forward, but they just had a terrible race. They just didn't seem to have anything go for them. And they just slipped further and further down the field, which was a shame because they ended up finishing. I think they were both last by the time all the retirees had gone, if I'm not wrong.
Or Norris.
Oh, yeah, Norris. Did they?
Doris.
Yeah, Norris. Yeah, Norris came last.
just Norris. Yeah, I did the same thing as you. I put Hulkenberg in the team too, just because I think he shows his pace, and he showed his pace during qualifying. He did actually get to Q3, didn't he? So he was...
Mm-hmm.
Was he? Yeah, he was.
Hulkenberg?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he came 7th, didn't he?
Something like that. So I thought it was...
we should know this.
Yeah, we don't go by stats here. I like him. So I put him in my fantasy as well. I've actually got Nick De Vries, mistake.
Yeah, that was it. That was
Charles Leclerc, mistake. And then I did luckily take Alonso and Verstappen, but
I had Alonso and Verstappen, and I had Hulkenberg. Who else did I have? I had Hulkenberg, and let me find it wherever it is.
You have to go for the cheap ones, otherwise you can't get Max in.
Yeah. So you've only got 100 million budget. So I went for Verstappen, Alonso, Sainz, Hulkenberg, and Ocon. And I thought, yeah, come on, Ocon has been pretty consistent last season. He's just one of those drivers that's just always there, isn't he? He's always.
We'll talk about him in a second, Thomas.
We'll talk about Ocon in a second, because if you think Hulkenberg was a bad decision, it went from bad to worse. And then obviously Red Bull and Aston Martin for the teams, but. Yeah, just a bit disappointed with Hulkenberg. So yeah, let's talk about Ocon, shall we?
Oh man, it just went from bad to worse to meme. It just couldn't get any worse. I mean, you'd think for a team with the experience of Alpine now, they've been in the sport for a couple of years at least in Formula One, not making many mistakes. They've been pretty consistent with what they put out with their cars and drivers. And they were just getting the most simple things wrong. And I was like, how can you get this wrong? How is it possible for a team with that many people in it to get that wrong?
Oh, no. I can't even remember what Ocon's penalties were for. There was that many of them. I
can tell you.
Go on, tell me.
I think grid place, so the start, he wasn't in the right area.
Yeah.
So he got
forward in the start,
a 5 second for that, I think. And then he goes into the pits. You're not allowed to touch the car. They changed the front wing.
Oh, yeah.
Gave him another penalty for that, another 10 seconds. And then he got another one for speeding in the pit lane for another 5 seconds.
Okay, so he had a 15 second, didn't he?
So he ended up with 15 seconds. No, 20 seconds, because one was a 10.
I think he served 15 in one go, though, didn't he? Because he had the two that were joined together.
He ended up serving like 5 minutes in the pit lane, which is just an embarrassment, to be honest. And then eventually they're just like, we'll retire the car.
Yeah, they just retired him. It was a shambles from Alpine. After such a good season last season, they've not started this season well with Ocon.
It's an embarrassment. They've got to go for that same position as last year. They don't have McLaren that are going to challenge them this year, so they've got probably
Mercedes.
The best midfielder team. Mercedes are their challenge.
Yeah, that's it. You know, they're on a par with Mercedes, I think. And we've got to take a special mention to Pierre Gasly, because for me, as good as Alonso was this weekend, I'm going to say that Pierre Gasly was driver of the day.
Ooh,
yeah, just enough. Because he started dead last and he came P11, I think, by the end of it. I think you can't say fairer than that. He's. Was he P11 or was he P9? I can't remember.
We need to get this on the screen. This is awful. We haven't had a single fact. I'm getting up.
Yeah, come on. We need... It's so bad.
Showing our professionalism as always.
Yeah.
He finished in 9th.
Yeah, so he did. He got points.
So he did get points.
There you go. Drive of the day for me then. Drive of the day.
2 points. Yeah, that's actually... God, I didn't know Albon finished 10th. This is awful.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Williams are good this season. I think that they've got a decent car underneath them.
Yeah, they do. Looking at lap time on that as well, they weren't far away. Sargent wasn't far off Albon. Yeah, no, actually, looking at that now, Gasly has done a phenomenal job to get into 9th position. Maybe he has got a quicker car, so the overtakes aren't too bad. And we don't really get much coverage of those cars in the race anyway. We watched the Aston and the Mercedes battle pretty much the entire way through on Sky Sports.
Yeah, we did. But like I said, Gasly had a fantastic race. And I think Alpine, if they can get Ocon and sort those issues out in the race. I mean, Ocon came on the radio, didn't he? He said, well, I've been doing all this like my entire racing career. But I'm like, you can't have been, because if you sped in the pit lane your entire racing career and drifted forwards on the start line your entire career, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, imagine they start dishing out some penalties for previous race results.
Retrospective
they
penalties.
Look back and they go, actually, he was doing that for all of his career, so we're just going to remove him.
Yeah,
poor Ocon. Partly his issues, I think, but also mainly, I would say, the team's strategy on what they did during that race was just shambolic.
Maybe it's just first race
one-off.
Nerves.
Yeah, I think that has to be a bit of a one-off for them. Norris dead last. Show 16th, bad performance, because we saw Bottas actually had pretty decent pace.
So who would you, I mean, this might be an easy question. Which team would you say had the worst opening race?
I think I've got to say McLaren. I mean, it has to be McLaren, because they had a DNF and a last place. It just didn't work. But I would be very tempted to say that AlphaTauri, because of the level that they've stepped back from last year's performance in Bahrain. Maybe not even Bahrain, but the entire season, they were pretty good. They're decent.
Were they?
It's
I
Red Bull's
thought
sister team.
AlphaTauri were pretty bad last season.
Not bad. They're not awful. They're not the team that you always look at and go, "You're shit." Like Harson, Williams last year. You just look at like the GOAT, Latifi, and stuff like that. Those are the guys that were terrible. There was just average talking points on AlphaTauri, but now I feel like they're just way back.
Well, to be fair, I mean, De Vries was 14th, and where was Tsunoda? 11th. Not horrendous.
Yeah, maybe I'm making a mistake on that, actually.
Yeah, never mind. Just scrub that.
I don't know. I just wasn't that impressed. I think the car looks stupid on track, and it was a weird and shambolic performance from that team. I wasn't impressed. That simple as that.
At least they finished the race, unlike McLaren, who had the DNF.
Yeah, at least they finished the race.
Yeah. Who impressed you the most then?
Oh, I've got to say Logan Sargent. I just thought the way he kept up was really impressive. They were switching positions during the race. Challenged well. He took his moments when he needed to. I don't know. I was just impressed with him. So I've got to take it back on what I said.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think I would agree with you on that. I think I'm pretty impressed with the fact that he's a rookie. And what was he? He wasn't that far behind Albon by the end of the race. So I think fair play to him. I think he's done what he needed to do. You know, that's what the kind of performance I would have expected from Piastri, but he didn't really have a fair chance, to be fair. I mean, he DNF'd on lap 13. So we're yet to reserve judgment on Piastri, but yeah, I think Sargent did really well. I think another person that I was also impressed with, like I've mentioned, was Gasly. I just think he had a fantastic weekend. So let's go with Sargent and Gasly just to make it fair.
All right,
fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, where does this leave you for the rest of this season thus far? I mean, what's your thoughts after race one? Are you just as excited for the rest of the season?
No.
Done. That's it.
Yeah. I absolutely love Formula One. I'm always going to love Formula One. I don't really care at the end of the day where people finish. I just love the sport. But it would be so much nicer to watch racing throughout the field rather than Red Bull flying up off the road. They're completely in their own bracket. Mercedes won't be battling anyone really this season because I don't think Alpine will be able to challenge that Mercedes. Ferrari are crap with their strategy. It just everything seems to point towards the fact that everyone other than Red Bull has no idea what they're doing right now.
Everybody other than Red Bull have got a lot of work to do, it seems.
Yeah, they've just mastered it. They're doing exactly what Mercedes did. And they've complained so much in the years saying they can't be arsed with one team being miles out. And I bet right now they're all going, this is fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
I hate that. I really can't stand that the sport's going in that direction again for a whole year.
It is early. It is still early days. And like you said, it could be a case that it just suited the car with Red Bull this weekend. I just... if Mercedes and McLaren have got these B-spec cars, they've got to get these ASAP, because I'm sure we've got a little bit of a wait, haven't we, before the next race? Again, we should know this. we have. Yeah, we've got 2 weeks. We've got 2 weeks before the next race, and so 2 weeks is a short turnaround if you've got a completely new concept, and it's unlikely they're going to run it straight away.
Yeah, there's no way.
But somebody's got to do something. I just hope that Stroll is true in his word to say that Aston Martin is going to be a lot quicker towards the back end of the season, because I want somebody to be closer. I want, you may as well just, like it was with Mercedes for so many years, you may as well just exclude P1 and P2 and forget about that, because Perez isn't even challenging Verstappen. He's nowhere near. And so you just forget about P1 and P2 and just start from P3 down. P3 is basically the winner of the race. And that's how I used to have to watch F1 with Mercedes, and I don't want that again. We had such a good season in 2021, and then we had to change the rules, and I get why we did that. But now we're in this position where we've got another team dominating. We don't know for how long it's going to be.
Yeah, I feel like there's just no way of replicating that 21 season. We'll probably not see that kind of an ending. Maybe even in our lifetimes, we won't see that again. I mean, it's amazing to go into the last race and have two drivers completely level on points. I just feel like the only way they could really improve the sport is if there was one car and everyone was in the same car, and you see the true pace of every driver. But that will never happen because the whole thing is manufacturers come to the sport. Maybe we have to wait until 2026 to get a developer like Audi's come in and really shift things up again. Maybe more teams. I don't know.
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense because you've got the cost cap in place, and so that should level the playing field. You've also got the limiting testing items that should also level the playing field. But it has to an extent, like you said. In Q1 they were all a second apart, but when it came to qualifying, that Q2 and Q3 that wasn't the case. And it certainly wasn't the case in the race. Verstappen was just away. It's because we had so much expectation, because after testing we thought, we've got Red Bull again, obviously quick, but Ferrari looked there or thereabouts, Aston Martin looked there or thereabouts, Mercedes looked there and thereabouts, and it just didn't materialize. And I'm just praying that was just down to the track. But from what I've heard from Toto Wolff, from George Russell, from the Ferraris, that isn't the case. It just seems that Red Bull are way out in front.
Yeah, I'm let down by that. And Toto saying that we can take inspiration from the Aston Martin team is just, in my opinion, that's an embarrassment. You can't take inspiration from a team that have been nowhere near the front of the pack since they joined the sport or took over from Racing Point. I think it's just an embarrassment.
It begs the question: how long do you think Hamilton will put up with it?
Hamilton doesn't seem to care anymore. I think we've got hopefully a special guest coming on this week that we're going to chat about this with, who's spoken to Hamilton about the different things that are happening within the FIA, like the rules of jewelry and what you can say in the paddock and things like that. So his quotes of saying that he doesn't really care if he gets penalties on that just goes to show that I think he's beyond the winning part of his life and he's just in the sport. I don't see him winning much anymore now. His run's kind of come to
big statement. Big statement that.
Yeah,
that's going to ruffle some Hamilton supporter feathers.
Yeah, it should do. I think Hamilton fans need to wake up now and realise that he's potentially come towards the end of his career in Formula One. But I said that about Alonso years ago, and look where he is now. So
that's true.
Who am I to tell?
But it's a similar circumstance to what happened with Vettel, wasn't it? He moved to Ferrari, and that car was just never quite good enough. It never materialised to be what it was expected to be, and then he made a bad decision moving to Aston Martin at the time that he did, and that didn't go particularly well. And we could see a similar thing happen with Hamilton. It's not guaranteed, and we're saying this after one race. It is crazy to say this. It's the same. It's the same thing that we do when testing's on. It's like we judge everybody of their performance on how they do it testing, which bears no relevance to anything, which clearly has been proven this weekend. And so it remains to be seen. But there's some doubts with this season. There's some doubts over the teams, their abilities, and their performances. So it remains to be seen. But I'm just glad racing is on because it gives you something to do on a Sunday. Yeah,
it has. Yeah, it gives my weekend some substance rather than just sitting in my pit and not doing anything all weekend and just waiting for Formula One to start.
Yeah, the past 3 months, Brad's been like that. In his pit.
I haven't moved. This weekend, I did nothing. I did nothing all weekend other than the Formula One. I waited for it to come on. I watched every session. But that's the love that I've got for the sport. That's all I want to do with my weekends is watch Formula One, and I was so let down by that race, as a lot of people were. I mean, if you look at my Twitter, which I'm sure everyone does because I've got like 30 followers now, you'll see that I posted that this could be the greatest Formula One season ever if everyone's within a second of each other. That is not the case. I got that so wrong, and everything that I've said in our previous podcast has always been wrong. Listening back to them, I'm actually quite embarrassed. If you go back and listen to the one with Kelly, I was saying something about I don't even know what I said, but the predictions were all wrong, every single one. So that goes to show that I know what I'm talking about.
Well, we do say this at the beginning of the podcast. We don't really know anything, so we don't offer anything in way of enlightenment or anything like that. So you have to bear that in mind when listening to it.
The greatest thing I took from this weekend was the jokes that I saw online about the L plan for Alonso. I don't know what it came from, where it stemmed, but everyone keeps putting in like chats, believe in L plan. I don't know what El Plan is, but it was just funny. It's just something that, I mean, Alonso must have said something when he joined Aston about his plan to be champion again. And he genuinely believed that he could do it. So
it was something to do with Alpine, wasn't it? El Plan.
I don't know. I don't know if it was to do with Alpine. I need to look it up. But it made me laugh
sure
anyway.
I'm sure it was. But yeah. So disappointing, but hopeful that something different is going to happen in round 2, which is in Saudi Arabia, I think, isn't it? Next time round.
Do you want to check?
Don't tell me you don't know what it is.
I don't, Tom. I'm awful.
Yeah,
it must be.
It's Saudi Arabia. It's on the 17th of March to the 19th of March. So the race is on the 19th. And I can even tell you what time it starts. Q1 is at 5 p.m. and the race is at 5 p.m. So
perfect.
Easy enough to know.
Saudi is another one of those very testing tracks under the lights in Jeddah. So we're going to see some serious pace from the Aston and RedBull in that track. I feel like that's going to be something to watch.
Yes, a low downforce circuit. So it'll be interesting to see which car that favours and whether it shakes
Ferrari,
the field at all.
Essentially, because last year Ferrari seemed to be really strong around the Jeddah circuit. So
they did.
Maybe we'll see a really quick Ferrari. Fingers crossed
we will. Yeah. And so, like you said, we've got potentially a special guest coming on this week. You will. He's a lot more famous than we are, and that's saying something because we're extremely famous.
Oh, yeah.
But he's going to give us some proper insight from inside the paddock. Can you believe he's saying that? He's been inside the paddock, which is more than can be said for us too. Even though you're going to be boots on the ground in Spain, you give us you're going to be live, reporting live.
I'm hoping that I can actually meet a couple of these guys out there if they're going to be there. I mean, that'd be interesting. I have to pitch that to them, but it's something to behold if I get into the paddock.
If you get into the paddock when you're there, I'll be fuming.
No. You'll lose your head.
You could report live from the grandstand. That's good enough.
I'm probably the most useless person at carrying around the camera and doing my own vlog. You get angles like this. All you would see is my fat chin. So I don't think it would be fantastic footage, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
But before we end, Tom, do not tell me you weren't going to do top 3 winners and our losers.
Oh, I did forget, actually, to be honest, because we did mention who would impress us the most. Right. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You can go first, Tom.
Right, okay. So top 3 winners. Let me bring up the drivers.
Let's get the standings back out.
So obviously, I'm just going to be the boring one and say Verstappen.
Okay.
I'm going to say Alonso, definitely, because he's come from a team that was best of the rest to now a team that was fighting for a podium. And I'm going to say Stroll, just because he's had the incident. You could see his hand was completely bruised and he's had some form of surgery, I think he was saying.
Yep.
So he potentially has some pins in there. So to come 6th is pretty good going. So I'd say Verstappen, Stroll and Alonso. What about you?
I'm actually going to go for completely different order, which doesn't happen very often. I'm actually not going to say Alonso because I think for me, Alonso, I kind of expect that if he's in a quick car, we know Alonso's aggressive and quick. That's normal. So I'm not going to say him, even though I am very happy for him. I'm going to say my first one, Bottas. A good position to finish 8th place. We haven't really talked about him today, but compared to last season, I think he DNF'd at Bahrain and he just continued that DNF, all the way through the season, pretty much. I don't know how many races he actually finished last year. So I'm going to say Bottas. I'm going to say Gasly as well, because I think Gasly really put in a crazy performance to get into that position.
Good shout.
I thought you would say him, actually. But impressed with Gasly. And then I'm also going to say Sargent, like I've already said in the episode. So, really, really impressed with Sargent. So I've got to put him in there.
Yeah, to be fair, I think that all 3 of them are a good shout. And to be honest, you could have picked any one of those. They've all had a pretty good weekend, so we know who's started off on the right foot. So bottom 3 losers. I'll let you go first.
I mean, Ocon has to be in there as my top loser of the weekend because that's just the most ridiculous piece of racing I've seen in my Formula One career as a journalist. Absolutely ridiculous to go. I can't believe he even finished 41 laps with the way they were going. So fair enough. So him. I've got to say Piastri as well, because I think that was just a letdown. 13 laps on your first race. I'm sure he's going to be pissed off about that one, and they're going to want to really nail down on that car what's going on and figure it out for him. Otherwise, he's going to have a really shit year. So I've got to say him. And then my third one, it could be Leclerc, but I'm actually going to go with Norris, just because having 903 stops during one race isn't acceptable. You can't come in every lap and make a change and fill things up. It just doesn't work. That's not how Formula One's meant to be.
No.
He was 2 laps down, which doesn't happen very often. So real shame for Norris, even though we know he's a great driver.
Yeah, I think all three of those are pretty much on the money. I'd go with Norris. Oh, I don't know. I don't know whether to just go with the 3 DNFs, to be honest. Ocon, Leclerc and Piastri, because Ocon, obviously, he's had a terrible weekend because of the team and partly due to himself. There's just ridiculous amount of penalties. I'm surprised he doesn't get any penalty points for that many, to be honest. Leclerc DNFing before the end just seems like such a Ferrari thing to happen again. And then Piastri, I just feel bad for Piastri because it's his F1 debut and he only got to race 13 laps through no fault of his own. He made a good start, it seemed, at the beginning of the race. So.
Totally agree. The only reason I wouldn't have picked Leclerc is because they actually showed pace they didn't think they had. And he looked good, and there's not much you can do about that failure. Was it engine? I think the engine just failed or something like that, which is a really bad sign for Ferrari, by the way. I didn't even think about that. How bad would it be if Ferrari had to replace already?
Yeah, because he had a replacement energy store, and you only allowed 2 of those for the entire season, and he's already taken one of them. So not a great start for Ferrari. No,
it could be bad. We talked about it last time, didn't we? Towards the end of the year, we have no idea what position that's going to put Ferrari in.
No, we don't. I can only imagine it will hinder them, but it remains to be seen. So I think that was done for Bahrain. Like I said, it's Jeddah next weekend, in a couple of weeks' time. So we will be back for that. We've got a special guest on this week, if all goes well. So we should have that podcast out over the weekend. But until then, make sure you're following us. I will say this every week, as I always do. We're both getting pretty well known on the Twitter sphere now. We're both above 30 followers, and so
I'd actually wait. Let me stat check that. I feel like I might be on 27. I'm on 27 followers, Thomas.
Oh dear. Okay, so Brad's
those
not
guys
quite...
that unfollowed me, they can just jump. But we'll be back at 30 soon, I'm sure.
If you follow us, for F1's sake, Brad, for F1's sake, Tom on Twitter. We've also got Instagram, which is just for F1's sake. So we're posting reels and things from bits and bobs that we're doing, and we've also got TikTok, which I think is just all the same. We've got a link tree on all of our social media platforms, and so that'll give you the links for everything that you need to know in regards to for F1's sake. So until the next time we speak to you, which should be this weekend, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for sticking with us for season 2. We're here for the second season, and we will be with you all season long. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you soon.